See. Hi, everybody. Hello. Welcome to the live. Can y'all hear us? Let us know in the chat if you can hear us. Hi, Flapper. Hi, Belong to HG. Hi, Ivy, House of Bark. How are you? Can y'all hear us okay? Thank you, Carol, for the super chat. Oh, that's very sweet for your mod team. Oh, thank you. Romeo's going to eat well for the week. If you don't know, I have an 18-year-old cat, HD, named Romeo.
Oh, I see. Right. I was going to ask where for Romeo. So
yes.
he's waiting for his kitty treats, is he?
That's
okay.
right. That's right. Good old pussycat. Hi, Mary. Nice to see you. Can y'all hear us? Let us know. Lucky Star, don't worry. I will behave myself. Okay. If not, HD will punish you, I'm sure. Okay. So first of all, thank y'all for being here. Thank you for joining this live. Can y'all hear us? Because I'm not seeing anyone in the comments. Can y'all let us know if you can hear us? I'm pretty sure they can. Okay. Let's see here. Okay, I'm going to put that in there. Okay, you hear us. Okay, thank you, Lulu's mom. First of all, before we get started, thank you, HD Tudor, for joining us today. We're so excited to have you back on the show.
Thank you for inviting me on again, Michelle. Pleasure to be here.
But before that, we have to congratulate HD Tudor. Today is his 10th anniversary for his blog. 10 years today.
It certainly is, and thank you for recognizing that. Yes, way back on the 31st of August 2015, the Knowing the Narcissist blog sprang into life, and over 30 million blog hits later, it's still going strong with a legion of dedicated readers and millions of people that have been helped throughout its time. So I appreciate you acknowledging that. And
how does it feel to have 10 years?
It's pleasing to have achieved that. The average life of a blog is about 2 years. So absolutely kicked that into touch by busting through it for 10 years. And it's been interesting seeing the evolution of all of the various platforms that I've used. And the blog has always been that constant. It was the starting place. And there are some very loyal readers of mine, individuals who were there from day one and still are. And there's people that have dipped back in and they've gone and then they've come back. And it's been pleasing to see today where some of the old hands, individuals that there at an earlier stage have popped in to say hello. So that's rather good. And yeah, there's a whole host of names I could mention, but I decided against doing so to avoid missing individuals out. But it's been interesting, as I commented in what I wrote on the blog, there's a whole host of Hoover triggers, as all of these names of people who've commented and contributed to the blog over the years have popped through my head. So it's a rich and varied experience. And of course, at the heart of it is enabling people to know the narcissist, providing them with an understanding of the way that the narcissist functions and thinks, a lot of the time with naturally the way I see the world, but also framing it from the perspective of the other different types of narcissists. And so it's a wealth of material there. And here I am, some 441,000 comments later. There's a very varied history. A few narcissists, unaware narcissists that have come to the blog in the past that float around. The vast majority of people there wanting help, and individuals who've struck up virtual friendships and have helped one another. So it's very pleasing to have stayed the course. There are periods, of course, when I'm busy, so I don't necessarily post as often as I once did and don't always moderate as much as I once did, but I still ensure that the blog remains and there are people that are active upon it, even if they're just reading, if they're not commenting. So it is a very useful resource for people with thousands of articles. So if the people who haven't dipped into it, and of course, there are some people that prefer to receive their material visually or orally, and there are others that would rather have it as reading material rather than watching and listening. So one's catering to different platforms in that respect. So yeah, a great achievement, very pleased with it.
Right. I mean, you have such a wealth of information here. So everyone go check out HD Tudor's website. It is NARCSIST site.com. He has a wealth of free information in the Knowledge Vault. Today's the 10th anniversary. You also can check out his books that he has available, his packages, as well as the detectors. I myself took his empath detector, and it was very fascinating. So if you want to find out if you're an empath, go ahead and take the empath detector, or if you know someone you think might be a narc, you can check out the narc detector. But it's very, very well done, very, very interesting to find out things about yourself that you may or may not know. I found it very interesting. And there's also consultations. So you've had over 1 million people on your blog. That's great.
Yeah, there's been 30 million blog hits, and naturally there are many people that come back again and again and again. So there are these periods of time when people might be on it for quite some time as they utilize the resource, and then they move on. Sometimes they come back. There's some people perhaps who just come back to read. Some people may not come back. But given the number of blog hits that there have been, is clearly several million people that have been helped by the material over the years.
That's great. So you're basically doing a public service by helping us defeat the narcissist. But today, we're going to talk about the other part of you, which is the psychopath.
Yes.
So it's interesting because when you tell people psychopath, they immediately think, okay, Jason from Friday the 13th wielding an axe, and he's running around, slaughtering people. That's like the first idolation that comes into people's mind about the psychopath, but that's not true about the psychopath. So what is a basic definition of a psychopath? If you can enlighten us with that.
Well, what you have is the term psychopath, which has obviously entered into popular lexicon. And when you're talking about, there is no such medical diagnosis as a psychopath. So you wouldn't get a medical practitioner utilizing it in the assessment of an individual. They would talk about antisocial personality disorder. And in a sense, psychopathy is along the branch of antisocial personality disorder. When I talk about what it is, naturally, as you've just alluded to, people have this image of the knife wielding, chainsaw wielding, impulsive, crazy dude that chases people. And of course, that's what's been concocted in books and films and television. And a lot of the time, the psychopath is nothing like that. What you have with an individual that would fit the concept of psychopathy is an individual that has no emotional empathy, as an individual where, as I explain, they pursue something called the necessary triad. So these are three things. So when I've spoken about the narcissist and the prime aims, when it comes to the psychopath pursues the necessary triad. So that's a necessity for control over people. So again, people are there to be utilized as appliances, as playthings. The psychopath seeks stimulation, and the psychopath seeks accumulation. And as I've written about and spoken about, for example, with accumulation, this means it's never enough. So it might be accumulating money or power or people or sexual conquests or Star Wars figures. With stimulation, we have a low boredom threshold. And therefore, that's why the psychopath can be prone to impulsive behaviors, because a lot of the time, in order to keep that boredom at bay, there's this going through one's head. What if? What would this look like? I wonder what would happen if. So, for instance, you might get a psychopath that would think, I wonder what that person's face would look like if I smashed it through a window. And because they have no restraint on their behavior, and they're subjected to impulsivity, and they have no emotional empathy, in order to pursue that stimulation and keep that boredom at bay, they'll drive that person's face through a window and then go, oh, right, that's what it looks like. And accordingly, you also have, with the psychopath, the fear response is entirely different. So that the psychopath doesn't experience anxiety or fear. So that's why, for instance, you will get individuals who are either psychopaths or have psychopathic traits in relation to the diminished fear response, who are very effective as, for instance, first responders or as a surgeon. Indeed, some of the best surgeons may well be psychopaths, because if you think about it, what are they having to do? They're invariably involved in life-saving activity under considerable pressure, and you are cutting into somebody's body. Now, if you're a little bit squeamish, you're not going to be a particularly good surgeon. If you're concerned about the fact that you're going to be wielding a scalpel and there's going to be blood everywhere and that troubles you, you're not going to be an effective surgeon. Whereas if you simply don't care about those factors because it doesn't impact upon you, you'll be far more effective. Because you're able to operate under pressure, you don't have that anxiety or the skittishness that's present in other people. You become far more effective. And also there's the stimulation of it. This is interesting, saving this person's life. So often you'll find amongst surgeons a higher degree of psychopathy compared to other aspects of the population. So what you'll find with there is, as I mentioned, no medical definition of what a psychopath is. But in essence, it's somebody that pursues the necessary triad. They have no emotional empathy. They're often charming, but it's superficial and glib. Some have a low executive function, and these are the ones you'll often find in prison. Others have higher executive functions, such as myself, where you'll invariably find we don't get caught, and we're the ones that end up running corporations and countries. And there is this necessity of seeking the stimulation to keep the boredom at bay. There is the engaging in what would be criminal conduct. And again, there's a variance in relation to the extent to which the individual gets caught, whereby those with the lower cognitive function are more likely to find themselves in prison. It's governed by deceitful behaviors. There's aggressiveness, not always necessarily manifesting, but again, it depends upon the type of psychopath that you're dealing with. There's a complete disregard for the safety of other individuals. There's no concept of remorse that's involved. Social norms may not be abided by either. So what television, etc., has done is taken somebody that goes around killing people and does so in a rather gory way, and that attracts the label psychopath. But that is just perhaps one version, and there are psychopaths that will behave that way. There are individuals who are serial killers who've engaged in who would fit the classification of a psychopathic individual. There are others who are not, and there are plenty of psychopaths who've never killed and never will kill. It's more likely to be the metaphorical blood on the boardroom floor, for instance.
Okay, so basically there are different types of psychopaths, like there are different types of narcissists. Now, I know that you had mentioned previously that you have a legacy that you're building, and this is why you're doing it, not necessarily to help people, but to build a legacy and to correct the misconceptions and the wrong information about narcissists. So now you're adding psychopathy to that as well. You're planning to add a little bit more to your legacy, because I feel like there isn't enough work on I guess, psychopaths or psychopathy. So you're saying that there's not an actual medical diagnosis. What do they refer to someone who's they don't call them a psychopath? Like what is the new term or the medical term?
They will state that the individual will have antisocial personality disorder. That's the DSM-5 definition of the behaviors which sail closest to psychopath. But there are distinctions between the two. So, as I've explained in separate work, that in effect psychopathy is sort of along the branch of the antisocial personality behaviors that exist. But if you were to ask a clinician, they would say, yeah, they understand the concept of psychopathy. But if they were asked to make a diagnosis, they would never diagnose somebody as a psychopath, because they don't use that. The reason why I continue to use the term is because it's got familiarity for people, and keep saying antisocial personality disorder.
Is that like a sociopath? Is that a sociopath? I'm sorry, is that like a sociopath? Because I feel they use that term a lot.
You get into another distinction when it comes in relation to sociopaths. So again, similarly, sociopathy is not something that would be given a medical diagnosis, However, a simple, and it is the case that even amongst those that are in practice, often use psychopath and sociopath interchangeably. So if you were to ask them to provide you with the definition of it, they may well struggle in that regard. A simple way to look at it is that basically a psychopath runs cold and a sociopath is more likely to run hot. So they're more likely to be skittish and they're more likely to show a more anxious response, whereas the psychopath has that much more cold iciness about them. And you also have, of course, differences which will be seen with regard to the constitution of the brain, the way that the amygdala is formed, which allows people to make an assessment also. I think it was Robert Fallon who was looking at scans of brains, and you can make a determination from that, which assists in saying, because there's a different sized amygdala, which supports an individual being a psychopath. And he saw his, although didn't realize it was his. And it was only afterwards that he realized that he'd sort of said, oh, that image is of a amygdala that belongs to a psychopath. And then he found out that it was his. So he suddenly realized what he was.
Okay. So this person opinion says, think they can only diagnose a psychopath in an autopsy. Would that have to do with the way you mentioned about the brain? What do you think about this comment?
Well, I think what they're driving at is what I've just been mentioning, that again, a clinician isn't going to use the diagnosis of psychopath. It's just a familiar term that's used. You can diagnose someone with antisocial personality disorder, which is what a clinician would do, and you could also have that affirmed by taking scans of the brain to look at the size of the amygdala, because that is a factor that's taken into account as well in making the determination.
When you were diagnosed, did they do that to you, or did they just base it on your personality?
It's based upon my personality and the behaviors that I'd engaged in.
Okay. So you have mentioned that you are actually a hybrid. You are part psychopath and part narcissist. You always also mentioned that you identify more with your psychopath side than your narcissist side. So the fact that you are a narcissist and a psychopath, is that kind of like a double whammy for you? Because not only do you have the inner monster of the narcissist, but you also have the boredom problem of the psychopath. So is it harder for you to control, or does one take more control than the other?
I lean more towards being a psychopath, but naturally I have narcissism in amongst that, and it is the case. You'll either have individuals who are pure psychopaths, so they don't need fuel, okay? Then you'll have pure narcissists who then don't have the psychopathic aspect, and then you'll have the hybrid, which is the narcissistic psychopath. And so all psychopaths will have some degree of narcissistic traits and fairly strong, but they may not cross the barrier to be a narcissist. And for instance, they wouldn't need fuel in the way that a narcissist would. I need fuel, but my fuel needs are not as great as a full-blown pure narcissist. So I can spend much longer away from people, which rather pleases me, because as I've explained before, I don't tend to like people. I have rather a withering view of them. And it isn't a difficult issue in respect of control, because this is what I am and this is how I've always behaved. And because of my higher executive function, that has meant that I don't do the stupid things that some psychopaths would do. So, for instance, whilst I might consider taking action against somebody, I weigh it up in terms of what are the collateral consequences of that occurring. We'll find an alternative way. There'll be instances where I'll engage in behaviors which other people naturally will not go anywhere near. There will be instances where those individuals would think, goodness me, even when I've done that. So for instance, I might provoke a fight, but I'm capable. So it doesn't trouble me if I was to get into a fight, because I'd be able to find my way. I'd be able to defeat the individual if it came to a physical interaction between me and that person. I'm trained that way. I am capable physically. So provoking a fight isn't a problem because I know I'm going to succeed. And in the event, for instance, if I was outnumbered, then, as I've explained in recent writings where the psychopath defends, you look to take out the ringleader and maybe, his wingman, and the other ones then shrink away like shriveled up balls. So I have control over my behavior. I wouldn't say that I've got complete control because it's always there. So the ennui that exists, that's always hovering like a dark shadow around oneself, I'm always seeking ways to get rid of it. And many people would think, well, that must be tiresome, that must be exhausting. No, it's not. That's who I am. That's the way that I function. It simply means that my mind is invariably thinking about lots of different things, and I will get bored by certain things promptly, which causes me to go and do other things which I find stimulating, which includes considerable risk taking, which is advantageous because that aids me in what I do professionally. That's why, because of my psychopathy, I am ideally suited to what I do professionally, because I don't experience a fear response, which is very necessary given what I do, and it provides me with considerable stimulation, the situations that I'm involved in. And accordingly, my personality is ideally suited for dealing with those particular situations. Now, there will be instances where people will suggest, yes, but your lack of remorse and your absence of emotional empathy could prove problematic. And I understand intellectually where somebody is coming from when they make mention of that in relation to what I do. However, I actually regard the absence of that emotional empathy and the absence of remorse as factors which make me even more effective of what I do. Because if I was concerned by the ramifications of what I was doing, aside from their impact upon me, because naturally I am the center of my own universe, if I was concerned about those factors, I wouldn't be as effective. If I was worried about how it would impact upon somebody else, I would not be as effective as I am. And again, I have been built in a particular way, which makes me particularly effective with regard to the things that I do.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. Because you are a psychopath and a narcissist, do you have to get the prime aims and the triad?
So I look to achieve both, but I don't have to achieve both all of the time. So what
Okay.
that means is that, let's say, for example, I'm sat on my own and my fuel level is decent already. So I don't need to go and get fuel at that particular moment. There's nobody on my radar, so I don't need to control anybody. I don't need to acquire any character traits. I don't need any residual benefits. So at that particular moment, the prime aims, although they're valid, they aren't, I don't need to do anything in relation to them at that particular moment in time. What about on the psychopathy side? There's nobody there that needs to be controlled. Do I need to accumulate? Perhaps. Do I need stimulation? Yes. So if I'm sat on my own, I may read a book.
Okay.
And so I got that stimulation. Or I may decide that I'll have a conversation with someone. And then when I'm having a conversation with someone, I must control them. I'm drawing fuel from them. I might not necessarily need that fuel, but I'm drawing it from them, and the conversation's stimulating. I might find myself in a situation with someone where I control them, they're giving me fuel, but they're boring me. So I then either decide I break off and do something else, or I start to play with them in order to alleviate that boredom. So naturally, because that's what I am, it's important that I cater for both of those aspects, the necessary triad and the prime aims, but I don't need them all of the time. So as you know, there's 4 aspects to the prime aims, 3 aspects to the necessary triad. I don't need all 7 every single moment.
Right. Okay. So is boredom what leads to you getting into trouble? Is that kind of like your kryptonite? Like if you get really bored and let's say you have really low fuel levels, is that where the danger lurks and the impulsivity comes in and the little devil on your shoulder is like, HG, just do it. Just do it. Do you fight yourself in the urges and the monster when you have low fuel and you're bored out of your mind? Is that when things happen?
Well, I think it's important to draw a distinction between a
Okay.
scenario of low fuel and
Okay.
the boredom. So if we focus on the boredom aspect,
Okay.
because that's linked to the psychopathy. So there is this aspect when dealing with things whereby I have this thought as we're going through my head as to, I wonder what this person would look like if I upset them. Or I wonder what, and particularly, I have a fascination with fire. So that's
Yeah.
something that has been throughout my life, whereby what will that building look like when it's on fire? Fire is beautiful. It's a fascinating thing, and the way to control it and the way to create fires. And so again, I would have that desire to burn, and that was linked to the impulsiveness of wanting to create a conflagration. And one gives into it because it's like a siren's call. So particularly when I was younger, I was running around setting many things on fire because that was a wielding of my power. It stimulated me to do that. It relieved the boredom. It's like having it really is like having an itch and then alleviating the itch by releasing it. So for some, it would be, as I've mentioned, it maybe getting in a fight. It might be, for instance, having particularly kinky sex. It might be, for instance, getting hold of somebody and choking them and then seeing how long it takes before they lose consciousness. It might be taking a particular interest in the leaders of Prussia historically. There's lots of different things. It depends, of course, on the link to the level of executive function and intelligence. So a stupid psychopath isn't particularly going to be bothered about the leaders of Prussia. He's going to be looking for those cheap thrills, which is getting in a fight in order to alleviate that boredom. Going and burgling somebody's house because in effect it was almost like something to do. So you get that sort of lower grade behavior with it in terms of the impulsivity. And that's not to say, of course, that somebody who's an habitual burglar is necessarily a psychopath. Most burglars aren't. They're generally normal people that have no due regard for the rights and properties of other people. But there is that desire to give into it, to make that boredom go away because of all of the aspects. Gaining fuel for me is really easy. And as I mentioned earlier, Michelle, I don't have huge fuel needs in the way that pure narcissists do. I have a lot of friends. I have intimate partners. There's family. I have connections with what I do through work. I have the connections, of course, what I do through helping people in what
Yes.
I call
Through
blog.
YouTube and your blog.
Exactly, all of that. So fuel's never an issue for me.
It's the boredom.
It flows readily. The boredom is the issue for me.
But I would think because you're so busy that you wouldn't be bored.
Well, that's the point, that I ensure that I'm busy. So, for example, I like to get a tan, okay, but I can't just sit there and do nothing for 7 hours in the sunshine. It would drive me nuts. So I would be writing something, reading something, talking to people, doing work whilst I'm in a hot environment. I might be out hiking or whatever it would be, taking in the view, walking with companions, whatever it is, but just sitting there and doing nothing. No, when I'm waiting at an airport, there are instances naturally where I have patience. I have to because of what I do professionally, but I'm being stimulated when I'm doing that. So the role that I'm in at that particular time, because I'm focused on something, that gives me the stimulation that I need.
Yeah,
Boredom is my biggest enemy.
right. See, I'm the same type of person. I'm one of those people that I'm never bored. Being bored is a luxury. I'm always working 2 jobs, working on YouTube, working a full-time job, taking care of family. I mean, I'm just one of those people that I always have something to do. I never wake up and have nothing to do. I don't know how people do that. I'm just one of those people like you. I'm always on the go. So that's kind of how you are, and you're very physical. So you do a lot of sports that exert you physically. So that obviously helps with your stimulation by going out and cycling for 5 miles a day. That helps you with the adrenaline and with the boredom.
5 miles, that's rookie numbers.
Oh, okay. All right, then you're a good athlete here. Opinion says, can HG use mind control or be aware that his behavior could have a negative consequences, that it was something extreme? I'm not understanding the question.
Well, with mind control, naturally, that is inherent in the way that one controls certain people. One can control through the application of physical violence. Many people are not equipped to deal with it. I think it was Anthony Burgess that wrote in A Clockwork Orange that if you can guarantee the middle class protection from physical violence, they'll more or less give you anything that you want. They don't grow up with it. They're not equipped to deal with it. So the utilization of physical violence is one method of control. Then you get into the area of controlling an individual's mind, which can be utilized through inducement, so that you understand what it is that they want. And you offer that on the basis of them doing something for you. So in effect, bribery. You get to understand what that person's desires are, what their weaknesses are, so they can be exploited. So there is mind control in much of what is done by way of a manipulation, because it's about understanding the way that a person ticks, what their wants and desires and their vulnerabilities and their weaknesses are, and thus exploiting them. Was the question, my behavior could have negative consequences, that it was something extreme? Again, I'm not quite sure what my behavior does have negative consequences for other people, but that's their lookout.
Okay.
And by the way, tangling with me in certain instances.
That's right. And by the way, I did use fire on our thumbnail just for you, because I know you like fire. So I did try to incorporate that for you. Okay. Lucky Star says, has HG done a series on Kohberger?
I'm assuming this is Brian Kohberger. Yes, I analyzed him and provided an overview as to what he is. I also provided analysis of when one of the victim's sisters, I think it was the Gonzalez lady, spoke out and basically berated him and insulted him and explained the impact it would have upon him. I also have spoken about the impact of his incarceration and the fact that he's received some teasing and ribbing from other inmates. So yeah, I've got several videos. You just go on my channel, knowing the Narcissist HG Tudor the Ultra, punch in Kohberger's name, and you'll find 3 or 4 videos about him. So yeah.
Okay, so here's another. Now I have a question for you. Is Kohberger an incel? He seems like someone who wouldn't do good with ladies, and that's why you think he might have led to murder?
I don't know whether he's an involuntary celibate. I do gain the impression that he had difficulties in relation to his interactions with the opposite sex, and that was part of why he did what he did, because that threatened his need for control, and he sought to accumulate women as part of his behaviors. Whether he fits the definition of an incel or whether he subscribed to that, I don't know.
Okay. Laura Cox says, congratulations on your 10-year blog anniversary, HG. Have you ever encountered another psychopath who dropped the mask to destabilize you, not realizing what you are? If so, how did you react?
Hello, Laura the Explorer. Thank you very much for the congratulations. Pleased that you're listening in, as I expected you would be. Has another psychopath dropped the mask to destabilize me? No. I have had involvements with other psychopaths, but they've maintained the mask.
Oh, okay. But you knew they were a psychopath?
Not necessarily straight away. Over a period of time of dealing with them, I realized that they were, again, in what I do professionally, I find myself involved with more than people would ordinarily do so. And so I anticipate that I will come across them, and indeed I do. And after a period of time of evaluation, I recognize that the individual that I'm dealing with is similar to me.
Have you ever wanted to date a psychopath?
No.
No. Okay. Let's see here. I have my own questions. Okay. So when you were a child growing up, little HG, You knew you were different when you were a child, because you didn't have the same emotions like crying or tears or fear. As a little kid, so when you're like 5 or 6 years old, you're not going to know about a mask. Did your parents pick up on the fact that you behave differently than other children at that age?
Yes. So in those early stages, as I've mentioned before, that my siblings used to refer to me as the little alien because
Mhm.
my responses were different. They were not as emotion based as they were. And I operated at first in a very emotionless way, which naturally came to the attention of my parents, and my mother, being a pure narcissist, naturally regarded this as a deficiency on my part. And that meant that I became subjected to more abusive behaviors from her because I did not fit with the image that she had for me as her son. And as part of that treatment towards me, which naturally threatened my need for control, as I now understand, I didn't
Mhm.
realize that when I was a young boy. I
Mhm.
now understand that. That meant that it was prudent for me to then copy the way that my siblings behaved so that then I wouldn't attract the attention of my mother. So I would start with the smiling and the greater sort of, make my attempt at looking happy and elated or troubled, etc., so that I would fit in. So I learned from mainly my siblings to begin with, and then visitors to the house and other people, and also my father, because he wasn't a narcissist. He would, in some instances, look to sort of encourage me to. I remember that he would talk about it in terms of it's okay to express yourself. He didn't realize that that was missing. He thought I was suppressing it.
Okay, so you always talk about that that psychopaths are born, but
Mm.
narcissists are made. So you became a narcissist due to the abuse of your mother, who did not understand why you were behaving the way that you were behaving.
In effect, yes, I was subjected to that lack of control environment combined with the genetic predisposition, which resulted in me having a requirement for validation to seek fuel, etc.
Okay. So when as a child, like you said, your dad kind of encouraged you to say HD, you could be happy, you can be sad, you can have emotion. When did you realize, okay, I need to start pretending and being like other people? Do you consciously remember when as a child that you realized that you were different and that you started to create the mask by mimicking other people's emotions?
And I don't remember necessarily a precise day when it had occurred.
Hmm.
I've explained before that with many of my memories, they're not necessarily linear. So it's a little bit like how you remember if you go to a fair and there's that
Hmm.
machine that promises you some kind of stuffed toy and you stick your money in, and then you have the grabber that comes down from above. And
Hmm.
it's a little bit like that with my memories, that they're often isolated and in darkness, and it's like a grabber coming down and taking it out of the void, out of the darkness to recall. So they're often quite fractured. So I don't recall a specific moment in time and say, oh, I was suddenly 6 years old and that's when I knew that I was utilizing the mask. All I recall is that from a young age, I understood that it was appropriate to copy people because that was an effective way of getting people to do what I wanted. That's particularly what I remember, is wanting people to do what I wanted. Power,
Not to
control.
fit in, not to fit in. It was power.
It was power that I wanted. But remember, when you're a small boy, you are
Yeah,
physically inferior to an adult. So
right.
therefore, in order to gain that power, you have to fit in. You have to make them think that you're like them.
You mentioned that as a young child, you were a very good kid and you were a very good student because your
Mm.
mother was very firm.
Yes.
Uh, and so you learned quickly the consequences. However, you also started to watch your mother and realize that your mother was probably different in public, like she had a facade. So, did
Yeah.
you learn the skills of how to be a narcissist from your mother?
Well, I didn't learn the skills of how to be a narcissist from my mother. They became part of what I was because I was created as a narcissist. What I did was, in terms of manipulations, I learned many of them from her, because I saw the way that people kowtowed to her. And also my uncle, he was also a narcissist, and therefore I looked at the way that people dealt with them, and I thought, I want that. I want people to scurry around tugging their forelock and bending their knees and kissing their hands and, you know, bending at the elbow for them, these compliant individuals. I want people to do that, because I recognize that when somebody did something and I made them do it, it made me feel powerful. It made me feel good.
How did you get people to do what you wanted to do? Was it through the use of charm? Was it through the use of fear? How did you manipulate?
There's lots of different ways, and I've written about it as a child. Sometimes it would be the application of physical violence. So there's an instance where I spoke about one boy that I shoved into the nettles repeatedly in order to hurt him, which gave me a sensation of power over him. In other instances, it would be to stand up for people who were perhaps being bullied, because I was tall for my age, and because I did a lot of sport, etc., and because I didn't have that fear factor. So if somebody punched me in the face, yes, it hurt, but it didn't stop me because I was frightened. I would keep going. And that's often what would enable me to be victorious over individuals, because I would have that incessant ability to keep going. So even when I could taste blood in my mouth or my eye was closing from being hit, I would keep going and going and going, and they would be the one that would back down. So sometimes I got involved in quite a lot of fights when I was younger. In some instances, it was the application of fire that would cause people to do what was required. And in other instances, it was doing them a favor. I came from a well-off background, so I had access to money, so I could use that in certain instances. Simple things, for instance, going to the shop and buying sweets for everybody. That would get them on side, because kids like sweets, they like candy. In other instances, because I'm witty and I developed charm, so I understood the power of compliments. I saw the way that my mother would dole them out, sparingly but effectively. So I utilized that. And I saw more as time went on that it was advantageous to try and utilize, a lot of the time, charm and flattery and bribery to get what you want, because that meant there was a reduced risk with regard to people trying to threaten your control by involving the authorities, whether that's a teacher, the police, or somebody's parent, etc.
So you found there's more bees with honey than vinegar, because I think charm, people really don't pay enough attention to charm. And if you're really good at charming people, you can get away with a lot of things. So
Absolutely.
you were a good boy in school and you were charming. So
Yes.
were you ever caught, like setting fires? Did you ever get caught for your devious behavior?
Oh, there were occasions when I got caught out, but it was few and far between. There were instances, of course, where if you get into fights, you invariably do get caught, because there's a group of people making a ring around you going, fight, fight, fight.
Yes.
There are other instances, of course, where you'd ambush somebody, and you make sure, every battle's won before it's ever fought. So you make sure the odds are in your favor. And that might, where it's just be a one-on-one situation, there's no one around. So you give somebody a good larraping and then disappear off into the night, and they don't necessarily know who has done it, or in such circumstances there's nobody around to witness it. And also, with some of these individuals, they know better than to go and tell tales as well, because then there's a repercussion for them, and one relies upon that also. But as one got older, I recognized that in order to fit in and in order to maintain a facade, it was more effective to rely upon bribery and charm and flattery and wit and the exercise of my intelligence to get what I wanted, and then to develop the subtlety of ensuring that someone was bent to my will by virtue of informing them of what might occur if they didn't do what was required. I don't issue threats. My type don't. I simply inform as to what will happen, and people then understand that is what will happen, and therefore they ensure that they do what is required of them. There will still sometimes be instances for the application of physical violence, Professionally, that's something that occasionally has to occur. But ultimately, in my day-to-day dealings, I utilize non-physical methods of manipulation, which are linked initially, of course, to the application of benign behaviors through charm, flattery, bribery, etc.
Okay. Through the Looking Glass says, HD Tudor, I am reposting my question to add, was Ted Bundy a brilliant narcissist or a psychopath? What fueled his crimes?
Well, if you'd like to know what he was, I would invite you to go to the Knowledge Vault and access Know the Narcissist, where you can put a list of names forward for me to analyze.
Okay. So my question to you is, you utilize charm early on as a skill front, and then you talk about how you went to the school of psychopathy, figuratively, how you learned about yourself, because again, as a child, you weren't diagnosed really until you were in college that you were a narcissist and a psychopath. And you talk about how you learned that your siblings were the building blocks of the finishing school, your girlfriends were the pillars and the walls, and the good doctors made the roof. So this is your figurative finishing school of psychopathy. Is this where you honed in on your skills and learned about yourself, that you were building this finishing school, that you were collecting data and learning how to use it to your advantage?
Yes, I've always naturally been interested in what I am and what drives me. And so it allowed me to practice certain behaviors, to learn from certain individuals, to hone my abilities on certain individuals, and to explore and understand more about me. And so the various groups that you've just mentioned there, Michelle, were all part of putting that together. And that's what enabled me to be effective. One of the strengths that I have is the ability to absorb from other people. So it's a little bit like a device. Part of it's the character trait acquisition that occurs by virtue of my narcissism. But by drawing in aspects of other people, that I not only can take their experiences to pass off as my own, but what I do is that I recognize and learn from those individuals and take parts of their skill set and think I can use that, and whether it might be their knowledge about something or seeing the particular way that they do something. It might be the way that they speak. It might be the way that they look. It might be the places that they go to. And so I recognize the value in certain individuals that I can, if you will, absorb aspects of them and add it to what I am, which makes me more effective.
Okay. Now, you've also mentioned, as a psychopath and a narcissist, that you don't have attachments, bonds to people, that you consider people appliances. But
Yes.
do you have the ability to like people? Because people can have a car, right? And they can love their car because they worked for it. It's beautiful. It's shiny. It's got the leather seats. It's everything they wanted. It's a status symbol. Do you have appliances that you like, that you collect because maybe one is more valuable than the other? Not necessarily an IPPS, but maybe just, appliances like your friends you've known for 20 years. Obviously, there has to be something about these people that you value, that you like. Do you form some sort of like possession attachment to appliances? Not necessarily like an emotional. Is there any kind of attachment to your possessions?
It is logical to appreciate, for instance, a beautifully created motor vehicle, because
Mhm.
that's going to perform with a greater degree of reliability than a human being.
Okay.
So it actually makes more sense to like inanimate objects, in
Okay.
effect, because they are more likely to perform in the way that they're designed for. What makes human beings interesting is that there are individuals that are wholly predictable, but then there are instances where they are not, which can be stimulating, but can
Hmm.
also be rather disappointing because they don't do as required and they let you down. I recognize certain human beings who are appliances as assets, that they are of value to me, and
Hmm.
therefore I am well predisposed towards them. I
Hmm.
think you would describe it as saying, I would like that person But I think it's more accurate for me to say that I have an appreciation of them because they serve a usefulness to me.
Right. Because I know there are some people that you absolutely do not like. So I would hope that you would like me more than James Corden, because I know you don't like him.
You needn't worry about James Corden arsehole. You'd really have to be working hard to find yourself on par with that useless lump of lard. But I think naturally I don't go around, because again, I recognize that one, ordinarily, you don't talk about people in this way of saying, oh, I appreciate their value to me. Because people think that's a bit of a strange thing to say. I can tell you that because I can be truthful about what I am, because you don't know who I am.
Right.
But ordinarily, I would use phraseology such as, "Oh yeah, I really like Paul. He's a good friend."
Right.
But what I really mean is, I appreciate Paul. He serves a useful purpose to me.
So your long-term friends that you've had since childhood,
yes,
would they consider you a best friend? Is there someone out there who's like, HG's my best friend, but to you, they're just a very valuable appliance?
I don't necessarily think that any of them would really. They'd regard me as a good friend, and that they're a long-standing friend, and a friend whose company they very much enjoy. I don't think that any of them would say that they would consider me their best friend, because there is that detachment that I have from people. So I certainly don't regard anybody as a best friend.
Okay. So basically you have friends.
And thinking about it, I would suggest that of the different groupings of friends that I have, and I move in these different circles, so I have inner circle friends in different areas of my life. But I think if you were to go and ask them, do you consider HG to be your best friend? I don't think any of them would say he is.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. So when you are dating a girl, let's say you have a girlfriend and you have a group of friends, do you tend to spend more time with the girlfriend, not necessarily the friends? Do you just do like events, like a couple times a year, you have those groups of friends that you hook up with and go to a concert, or maybe you go to a game? So you say you have friends, but they're more like surface level. There's no like calling someone every day and having deep conversations with them.
I don't have any friends that I would talk to absolutely every single day. Gosh, that would be tedious. So there are friends that I would see with regularity, and then I might not see them for months. Then there'll be other friends. You see, I don't stay in one place. So I've got friends, for example, who I know they will go on a Friday night to a bar and they'll get together. If I'm in the area, I'll join them. But I might not be there for 3 months at a time because I'm elsewhere.
Right, because you travel.
Yeah. Or I'm traveling professionally. I'm involved in dealing with other people. I've got other events to go to. That group, they're all decent individuals, but they don't have the complexities in their life that I have, which I'm pretty certain they wouldn't want to swap. And they're perfectly content with that's the way that their lives are. And so because I have these different worlds that I move in, there is no typical setup for me to say, I would spend lots of time with this girlfriend, and then, I'd spend lots of time with these friends and so forth. It varies because I will see that group of friends, then I will see a different group of friends, then I'll be in a different place, which means it's a different group of friends again, depending on where I am in the world. And then that links into what's happening with me intimately. Even when I have an intimate partner that I have lived with, the nature of it is it's not like what I do is 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, pop down the dog and duck for a few jars on a Friday night, then Saturday go for a run in the park. That's part of the stimulation that I need, is that my life is not conventional in the slightest. So
no routine.
There are occasions. It was entertaining because when I was talking, when I was mentioning about the fact that the blog is 10 years old, and I can't remember who it was, but somebody commented about the fact that they recognize there are moments when it goes quiet, and then all of a sudden lots of comments come through, and they think to themselves, HG's probably sat at an airport and he's got a bit of time to do some moderation, or he's being driven somewhere and he's probably trying to write something on his phone whilst he's bouncing around as he drives through the desert or whatever. And they're not far wrong in that respect, that when, for instance, I'm making my videos, there are times when and you sometimes will be able to tell this because you can hear that it's at different sounds. There'll be more of an echo, less of an echo, that type of thing, that I'm in different places when I'm doing it. So I don't have that regularity of life. And so it's like lots of different pieces at lots of different levels at different depths. It's rather complex.
Right, because I know a lot of times I'll email you and it'll say out of office for a week, so I know with you, you're always very busy. My life is very boring, unfortunately. Mary Jules says, HD is my best friend. He just doesn't know it. Exactly.
Well, if you want to regard me as your best friend, you're allowed to do so.
Well, HD, you're one of my YouTube besties. I said me and you get along very well, so I think we're going to be YouTube besties.
Well,
you can put me in that category.
If you wish to attach that label to it, Michelle, you're allowed to do so.
Thank you. Okay. So I was listening to a video of yours last night that was very fascinating to me, and it has to do with tears. Now, I know you said you're someone who doesn't cry, and when you were a child, your dad or your mother told you, don't do that. So you learned very early on not to cry, but you were very fascinated on the fact that you can make other people cry, and there was different tears that you learned about through different experiences. So you learned that you can cause people to cry, obviously, through pain and hurt, also through pride and happiness. Like your dad, at one moment when you got the news that you made into the college of your choice, that he choked up, and it fascinated you that you made him cry with happiness and pride, and that you one time gave your girlfriend a necklace and she cried because she was happy. And then you had another girlfriend who cried of relief after several weeks of you giving her the silent treatment. So out of all the ways that you can make somebody cry, do you have a favorite? And one is more potent than the others?
The favorite is to have somebody cry out of fear.
Fear. Okay, that's another one. Okay. Fear.
That's pure negative fuel.
Okay. So you don't like the pride or happiness. That doesn't give you the cool, nice feeling.
Wow. It provides me with fuel naturally because I've provoked a response in somebody. But as I've written about in my book, Fuel, negative fuel is more potent. And the fact is that being able to elicit tears from somebody because sadness, it provides a degree of entertainment in itself, but fear enables one to wield that power over them. So it's negative fuel, therefore, as a matter of an equation, it is more potent. And for me, in relation to the imposition of fear, but not whereby it's brutish or rudimentary, there's a finesse to it, whereby the application of a subtle informing or suggestion or a certain behavior that elicits those tears, that is particularly satisfying.
So you talked about in your video how you had a girlfriend and you took her out, I think it was her birthday, and you bought her this very expensive necklace that was from Tiffany's. And when she started to cry at first, you were kind of confused, like, I was working really hard to make you happy. Now you're crying. But then when she told you she was crying because she was happy, and that gave you a surge of power. Would that be your equation of joy? Your version of joy? Was that?
I suppose that would be the case, that when she explained, "Oh, you're such a wonderful boyfriend," etc., and the tears of joy came, that it makes you feel powerful. It invigorates one. And I suppose it would be a sort of equivalency of what you would talk about as elation or joy.
So when your father cried out of pride,
and
you realize, okay, that's just for me, because that was a job well done.
Yeah.
Was that kind of like a happiness for you? Because that's what you would equate to joy, I guess, would be that same kind of power if you.
Yeah. For
Power
me,
state.
it's for me, for me, it manifests as power.
And that would ultimately be kind of your level of joy, I guess, is what you're saying.
Well, I don't call it joy because it's
Right.
power. And I'm at pains to emphasize that I don't experience happiness or joy. I suppose that I would say, if you wanted me to describe it, I would say it's probably similar to what you might think of as joy, but it isn't for me. It's power. That's
What
what it
does
is.
power feel like to you? I
It's
don't
a
understand
rushing
what power feels
sensation. It's an ability to feel invulnerable and impregnable, that one is able to achieve whatever one sets one mind to.
Does it give you butterflies? Like, I mean, I guess I just don't
No.
understand what power feels like. Okay.
Well, as I say, it feels well. Okay. Have you ever taken ecstasy?
No,
Right.
I
Okay.
haven't.
Well, people who've taken, those who are listening who might have taken ecstasy, you get a rushing sensation where you feel like you might be about to take off.
Like
That
adrenaline, kind of.
No, it's not adrenaline, but
Not adrenaline.
it's a sensation of that you're going to lift off. It's a
Mhm.
sensation of that anything is achievable, that you could run that 4-minute mile, that you could scale that building. You feel imbued with this energy that feels like it's going to burst out of you, that's going to radiate out of you.
Is
And
that
that's the sensation
euphoria?
of
Is
power.
that euphoria kind of? Is that what euphoria is? Kind of an excitement?
Well, you might call it that. As I say,
Okay.
I label it power.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Let's see here. Let's see. Okay. So as a psychopath, you don't have emotional empathy, you don't have remorse, but
Hmm.
do you personally have your own moral code that you live by? That you conduct your behavior by? Like, let's say you're a court, you're a judge, and you have your friends and your appliances, and by you and your moral standard, you conduct yourself in a certain way according to the laws of HG, right? So do
Yes.
you have your own moral conduct that you uphold for yourself and that you also uphold for the people around you?
I operate to a code which is my code. However, if I needed to deviate from it, I would do so. But there is a pattern of behavior that is associated with a code that I operate to. Yes.
Okay. Um, sorry, I'm just writing my questions here. Let's go through some comments. Are we okay with time, HD? Because I have a lot to,
Yes,
but
that's
okay.
okay.
Okay, great. Okay. Um, Susan G says, do you ever find or feign remorse or empathy in a situation where you think it might be expected?
Oh, yes. There'll be instances where I will express what is cognitive empathy. So I understand where there will be instances where looking concerned would be
Mhm.
appropriate, or I really have to put my arm around somebody to comfort them. And there will
Mhm.
be instances where I will utilize expressions of cognitive empathy and feign it, particularly in the context of romantic relationships. There are
Mhm.
other instances where actually the absence of it is just what a person needs. They need to be told, you need to sort yourself out here. Mollycoddling and sugarcoating things isn't going to help them. They need the unvarnished truth. And often somebody like me is going to be able to deliver that, and it's precisely what they need. That's often the case. That's very effective in when I consult with people. One thing that I that I never do in consultations is give it the oh dear, that must be awful for you. I mean, that's really terrible. I'll say I understand the situation for you, but I'm
Mhm.
not there to make cooing and eyeing noises, because I don't want to confuse people by them thinking that I actually truly care about them, and
Oh.
and it gets in the way. So when you're talking about like operating to a code, for
Mhm.
instance, I operate with a code in respect of my clients, which is
Mhm.
I'm personable and I'm polite and courteous to them. So
Mhm.
I'm not horrible, but I'm not going to be there as a shoulder to cry on, because that isn't what you come to me for. There are other people you can go and do that. And I actually actively discourage people from staying in that position, because it means that you're giving part of you to the narcissist. and you're not going to move forward. There comes a time when basically you need to have your face dunked in the ice cold bucket and wake up to what you're dealing with and wake up to what you need to do. Time has gone for the, oh, if only and I wish. Balls to that. It's time for action. It's time to do things. Somebody like me is best placed to give that, because I don't have any emotional empathy, and I have cognitive empathy, but I'm very able to keep that to one side, because there are instances where it is not needed. So when it comes to aiding people in consultations, whilst I am civil and I am polite and I am very effective in the information they get, you are not going to get somebody going, oh, that must be really awful for you. How terrible. No wonder you're so upset. I know what to say, and I know how to say it, but I won't do it. I'm more likely to use that in my personal interactions. It's wholly false.
Right. So have you ever had to cut a client off because they were getting too attached?
No.
No. Okay.
No.
Well, I have to say you are very pleasant and very professional and very easy to work with, guys. He's very nice.
Thank you.
You are. You're very pleasant. Okay. So Marissa says, does alcohol or drugs affect the psychopath?
Yes, they do. So in the same way that if I drank a lot of alcohol, it would impair my judgment. I enjoy having a drink. I, at present, don't tend to drink that often, actually, now, as a consequence of other commitments. I did last night, for instance. I had guests and was hosting dinner, so some alcohol was consumed, but not.
Was it dirt champagne?
No, there was no champagne last night. It wasn't a champagne moment, and so consequently, it does have an effect. For instance, taking drugs, imbibing alcohol, it has an impact. It may not be the same impact as that affected by other people. So, for instance, when I mentioned about ecstasy earlier on, many people get loved up. It makes them feel happy and huggy towards people. It didn't. It just made me want to dance and fuck people.
Right. So I remember you told a story in the past how you did some kind of hallucinogens with your friends. You did some kind of drugs, and that you had like these very weird hallucinations where you saw like a devil like in the fire. Did that freak you out? Is it the sense of losing control that makes you not really want to do drugs because you like the control?
Well, part of it is I don't bother with it because it's ultimately not going to be very good for your health, and health is important.
Yes.
Your mental and physical health is important to be effective. So I enjoy having a drink, but I never get blind drunk because that will affect my control, and control is hugely important to me. Ditto in relation to the use of recreational pharmaceuticals.
See, I don't do drugs because I don't like to lose control either. In the past, I tried marijuana, but I hallucinated and it freaked me out. So alcohol is one thing because I get giggly and stupid. I'm a happy drunk. But, as you get older, you learn to be responsible. But other drugs I've never done. And I obviously I just don't feel the need to do that. I've never been someone who's been interested in altering my mind. But the one time I did, it freaked me out. And I'm like, I'm not doing that again.
Yeah.
I think I have a little bit of a control mechanism for myself. Lucky Star says, what does HG have to say about the human soul?
If you believe in such a thing as a soul, you're entitled to do so. As I frequently explain, we all have differing perspectives about this thing called life. I don't necessarily subscribe to many of these perspectives, but I recognize that people have them. They may not be well-founded, to my mind. They don't sit up in terms of logic. I don't believe in the condition of a soul. I understand other people do.
Do you not believe in God? Do you believe in God?
I do not, albeit if I deem that it is necessary for me to believe in a God, I will do. But if you were to ask me what my default position, it is I do not. When you die, that's it. It's game over. You shuffle. That's it. You're worm food.
There was a study that happened recently that I found fascinating. And of course, I don't have all the facts, but there was a study done, I think in Russia, where they talked about what happens to the human soul or the human when they pass away, and they traced it to another universe. So my dad recently passed away in April, and he was a very big fan of space. So I like to think that my dad's out there in a different galaxy. That's the way I think about it.
If that provides you with comfort and you believe that he's in a different galaxy or universe,
Exploring.
then
That's right.
you are entitled to have that view. It might not stand up in logic or science, but
Yes.
then so many things don't, and that's why they appeal to people, because it provides them with a
Right.
coping mechanism.
Yeah.
And so I've often spoken about how the fact that I would be most pleased if there was an ability to download my consciousness.
Yes. Into a
So when
computer.
this, as I sit talking to you, I'm in this excellent meat suit, but at one point it'll let me down and I'll die. But
Yes.
if prior to that I was able to download my consciousness, my brain power, for want of a better description, and put it in another meat suit, then that would be fantastic. And then that would be the key to immortality.
Right. And we're going to talk about in the future about the paranormal and ghost and HD and science and all that. Ooh, for Halloween.
Yes.
Maggie Becker says, how does HD react to the death of a family member or friend? I apologize if this was already covered.
No need to apologize, Maggie. It's a valid question. So how do I react to the death of a family member? Invariably with jubilation, popping of champagne corks. No. I've explained hitherto that when it comes to death, that invariably it's a mild source of irritation in relation to some individuals who would be a friend, because they have gone and I wasn't able to have a say in their departure. I don't mean that I wanted to kill them. What I mean is that they served a purpose to me and now they don't, and that's rather annoying. So it's entirely focused on me. So if they are no longer around, they are no longer serving a purpose to me. It's only mild irritation, because it's not like my world falls apart because they're not around. And remember, I'm not sad or upset at their death because I have no emotional empathy. They're simply there to do what I require of them. And now you're no longer there. Right. Well, that's a little bit annoying because you're not around, but no biggie. I'll just move on to the next person instead. With family members, well, there are certain family members who I would actively encourage them to die. So consequently, if they die, I actually would have a degree of delight in the fact that they're no longer around. It would furnish me with a sense of power and aid my need for control that they are no longer about. But I don't get sad and I don't get upset, and I certainly don't miss any of them.
That's very interesting. Okay. Let's see here. So have you ever been caught out in public? Has your mask ever slipped? And someone ever caught you out with your
In
mask?
public, no.
No. Okay. And you find that being a psychopath, do you find that being a narcissist or a psychopath is more advantageous, I guess, in business, relationships, or strategy? Do you think your psychopathy or your narcissism serves you better in those areas?
One can see how both are advantageous. With the narcissism, that aids with regard to the necessity of control. And it also means that eliciting a response from people often is useful because it causes you to strive to achieve. So I suppose the vanity and the grandiosity and the pride that's integral in my narcissism assists in that striving for excellence. The psychopathy assists because there is the absence of fear, the devotion to the application of logic, and that results in much better outcomes because I'm not governed by an emotional response. I'm governed by one which focuses on logic, and therefore that makes one effective. So I don't waste time with emotional responses which would deflect from an appropriate outcome, slow one down, prove to be a hindrance. So they both aid. Interestingly, when I was dealing with a psychologist a number of years ago, she opined that my narcissism got in the way of my psychopathy because of the sort of vanity associated with it and the necessity of getting people to respond to it. I disagreed, but it was interesting to receive her input in that regard. I had quite a lot of time for her, actually. She had some useful insights. And overall, I lean more on my psychopathy because that is the cold, hard application of logic. And the necessity of stimulation means that it causes me to want to secure an outcome. So it makes you determined, and you take the initiative, and you're not resting on your laurels, etc. Which is part of the reason why I have such a prodigious output in relation to my videos and blog articles, consultations, alongside what I do in my private and personal life.
Right. Okay. Someone wanted to ask you about your relationship with animals, and I think he's answered that before, but I don't know if you want to answer that.
I'm not an animal lover.
He's not an animal lover. Well, a lot of people aren't. I mean, that's a fair thing.
No, I don't care for animals. I think they're largely smelly and get in the way, and they're rather unpleasant. And as a consequence of that,
Okay.
no, I'm not an animal lover.
Oh my God. Someone just said you two would make a great couple.
Well, that's very kind of them to say so. I don't think you'd necessarily think that, Michelle, after being my girlfriend for a period of time.
Well, you do know that Mom is approved of our wedding, guys, that we are.
Well, yes, I've heard that, and I understand that she's already been to see a milliner to get her hat ordered. So
that's right. That's right.
Putting matters in hand, exactly. Yeah.
And just so you know, this is the Mama approved wedding night attire for our wedding.
So, right. Okay. Yes. I was wondering who on earth that is. It looked a little bit like miming class, but so she's decided that you're going to be wearing some kind of Victorian ensemble.
That's right. And if you're really good on our wedding night, I'll let you hike up the 90 for 3 minutes, HD.
That would just fall off of its own accord.
Okay. So a lot of people are like, what is going on? There was a joke that we were engaged, you guys. So some people are just like so confused. Okay. So basically, I do have a lot of spicy questions called 50 Shades of Grey. And I know it's already been over an hour. So if y'all are interested, would you like me to ask HG some spicy questions? Put it in the comments before we close out of here. Let me know. But before we get into the spicy questions, I thought we'd play a quick game of this or that. Are you interested? Okay. So if you could, so basically we're going to play this or that. If you could save 100 strangers or a loved one.
100 strangers.
Okay. Passion or stability?
Stability.
Skill or popularity?
Skill.
Cherished or respected?
Respected.
Hero, anti-hero?
Anti-hero.
No company or bad company?
Bad company.
Oh, painful truth or comforting lie?
Painful truth.
Okay. Pause time or rewind time?
Pause time.
Arrive early, arrive late?
Arrive early.
Planning or winging it?
Planning.
Family or friends?
Friends.
Keeping the bedroom door closed or open? Is that
really would depend on the scenario, but if I had to go down one side or the other, the door would be closed.
Shall I say keeping the dungeon door open or closed?
Oh, there are no dungeons. They're
no dungeons.
Far more well appointed than a dungeon.
Okay. Looks or personality? What?
Looks.
Oh, okay. Calling or texting?
Calling.
Funny movie or dramatic movie?
Dramatic movie.
Chocolate or vanilla?
Vanilla.
Ooh, okay. Just not vanilla sex, right?
Precisely.
Okay. Dragons or unicorns?
Dragons.
Christmas or your birthday?
Christmas.
Really? You wouldn't choose your birthday because it's about you?
Yes, but birthday is just one day. And oh look, I'm a year older. What we fucking do? Christmas is much more. There's a much greater level of expectation amongst other people at Christmas time, which then lends itself to a much greater degree of manipulation.
Are you a good gift giver?
I'm an excellent gift giver.
Oh, good to know. We like a generous man. Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Wars.
Picnic in the park or dinner at a fancy restaurant?
Dinner at a fancy restaurant.
I totally knew you would pick that. Giant robot battle or dragon duel?
Dragon duel.
Spicy or non-spicy?
Spicy.
Spicy. Kiss on the first date or no kiss on the first date?
Oh, kiss on the first date and the rest. Come on.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Mystery or fantasy?
Mystery.
Historical fiction or science fiction?
Historical fiction.
Okay. And sunrise or sunset driving?
Did you say driving?
Yes, I'm sorry. Sunrise or sunset driving?
Sunrise driving.
Okay. So, are you able to stay for a little bit longer and we can do some 50 Shades of Grey?
Yes, I can give you 10, 15 more minutes.
Okay. We'll get into it. So basically, you're really good at the art of seduction. I would say you have a PhD in seduction, kind of an old school charm. Where did you learn the art of seduction with ladies?
It's
Like, did you
about
start
understanding.
early?
It wasn't about necessarily sitting down and looking at, I don't know, a black and white movie and going, oh, right, yes, that's a, dashing, chivalrous man, or reading some kind of book. It was actually about understanding what people want and giving them that. So part of it, for instance, might be that what would recognize that somebody would respond to being insulted and they get upset, and then you can make up with them. And the relief that they experience as a consequence of that is so powerful that it's worth running the risk of insulting them to begin with. In other instances, one can recognize that an individual is motivated by flattery about their looks or about their accomplishments. And so it's about understanding the person. There is no set method that one would apply. It's really my ability to understand people and then taking that understanding of people and using it in a romantic stroke, sensual stroke, sexual method. I keenly observe the way that people react. So it's a little bit like when I'm seducing somebody and getting intimate with them, that I have a very keen awareness of their responses. It's like picking a lock. So when you're picking a lock, you're obviously having to work the tumblers within. So you'll turn it so far, but you don't want to go too far because then you might snap the tool that you're using or crook the lock. And so you need to be gauging the response of the person to know, yeah, this is going in the right direction. I can keep going. No, I need to halt there. And now let's move on to something else. And so by having a keen ability to observe the reactions of people, for instance, what's their tone? Where are they looking? Are their pupils dilating? Are they blushing? Are they getting flushed? What noises are they making? Are they being tactile? Are they hanging on every word? Are they mirroring me? All of these different things. It allows one to recognize where to push. And similarly, where you can see that perhaps they're not reacting the way that you would want, you decide, right, that course isn't working. Let's move to another one. So it's not having a set toolkit. It's about understanding what makes that person tick. And people are vastly different in that regard, apart from the fact they all have wants and desires that they need to have catered to.
Okay. So when you're seducing a woman and you're being charming and you're taking her to the expensive dinner and you bought the flowers and you're being very, very gentlemanly, like, when do you introduce the cake? When do you come in and say, by the way, I want to tie you up and suspend you from the rafters? When, like you said, is it just the body language, or you just gauge after a couple of dates and you just say, by the way, I like to tie people up? Like, how do you bring that into the conversation?
Well, I don't start off by saying, do you find it exciting to have several Black Mamba vibrators inserted into your orifices? You don't drop that in over coffee, but rather when you're in bed with somebody, there comes a point where you can push a particular thing. So let's take, for example, one might place one's hands around somebody's throat whilst you're having sex with them and start to lightly choke them. And you can gauge the reaction to that. That there might be a panicked look from that individual, so you know they're not into it. And if I deem, therefore, that that's not appropriate to go down that route, one would stop. you can see that with some people, it would be the instance of they react to it. So they are into it. So you know that you can move along there. And then you know that there'll be similar acts along that particular branch that you can explore with that individual. In other instances, it might be where you've just enjoyed having sex in a fairly conventional way and you're resting between rounds. And so you're lying there and you engage in some pillow talk. And because they're in a sexual area, you might introduce something where you say, I had a friend who X, and then you gauge the response to see if that's something that gets their interest. You don't bulldoze your way in with it. One, of course, can, because being physically capable, you could easily overpower someone to do that. But that's not fun, because you want to get them to buy into going along with it, even sometimes where they're perhaps a little bit reticent, because one of the most satisfying things is to have somebody who isn't quite sure, but you lure them along the line of getting involved in that particular thing, and they find it all the more rewarding, which means they're flowing with fuel and they've bent to my will. So it's about gauging what they're into. And I've had a lot of sex and I've had a lot of sexual partners, and you also can recognize with certain people that they are more likely to be into certain things than others, and so forth.
Because with your psychopathy, one of the things is you like to push boundaries and you like that control. So the kind of the BDSM, kind of a sadist in a way. You're a little bit of a sadist when it comes to the bedroom.
With people, you might think, for example, how is it that a man understands that he gets off wearing a giant diaper and having a woman pee on him? Where does that come from? How does he wake up one day and decide, I want to do that?
Mm-hmm.
And the fact is, I've often explained that the only unnatural sex act is one that you can't perform. If you can do it, it has some degree, and it's not for everybody, but it has a degree of naturalness. And many people will surprise themselves as to what they will actually do. They would think, oh, I would never do that. But in the right circumstances and with the right partner who knows what they're doing, many people will go into areas and realms that hitherto they wouldn't thought was them. And they'd be like, gosh, I never thought, for instance, that I'd ever have a threesome, or I never thought I would be into being spanked, or I never thought that I would be into being choked, or whatever it might be. And they find that they are. But it's all about introducing it at the appropriate time. And yes, there is an aspect of my personality that is sadistic.
When did you find out that you liked to tie people up, that you liked that in the bedroom? Was it just through fantasy? Were you just drawn to it, or you just tried it one day and you thought, oh, I like that?
I don't recall precisely when there was a moment of thinking, oh, this is really good. It was just part of the repertoire.
Uh-huh.
It came about because naturally that links into control when somebody is bound and they're unable to move. And what's particularly desirable about it is utilizing the anticipation, so that they're bound and they're lying on their back and a pillow inserted under their bottom, and they're splayed there, and they may well be blindfolded as well. And so with the use of just speaking very quietly, or even feeling your breath, or the very slight sensation of your hand hovering over them, is hugely powerful. And so it came about as a consequence of my early interactions with individuals, because it was a way of applying control over them. And I found that it elicited particularly strong responses, because there's this aspect where that individual is completely vulnerable to you, which means that they have a heightened emotional response to what you do to them.
Interesting. Okay. So I have a lot of questions, but I know that we're ready at an hour and a half. So I don't want to take up all of your time. So does anyone have any further questions for HG? Let me know. Okay, let's see this one here. Opinion says, you surely couldn't just do that in the bedroom, given the women could well freak out and also believe they might not be around much longer. I think he talked about that with consent, that he's not forcing this on people.
Yeah, that was the whole point of understanding that there might be people, as I mentioned earlier on, they'll be initially reticent, but with some charm and let's explore. And as I said, you don't just drop it in over coffee. You put it in the appropriate circumstances, and you will try something, and they might back away from it. So you realize, okay, they're not open to that. But many people, as I've explained, they will be surprised by just what they, in the right circumstances with the right person. There's a lot of people who I've spoken to who've had very poor experiences in relation to kink activity, and then and it's because they've not engaged in it with someone who knows what they're doing. And so, yeah, an individual would freak out if all of a sudden, I punched them in the back of the head and then they woke up and found themselves tied to my bed. But
right.
You're not going about doing it that way. You're getting their buy-in to it.
So you like the fact of someone who's willingly going to submit, who offers up submission to your control versus you just taking it. You like the act of submission.
Everybody has to submit because that's the nature of needing control.
Oh, okay.
But I also like it when they fight.
You like it when they fight?
Yes, because there's a challenge included in that. But submission always ultimately has to come because that's the nature of gaining control, isn't it?
So let me ask you a question. What happens if you're dating someone and you really like this person, but they're like, nope, I'm not doing that. It's going to be vanilla. I'm going to wear that white nightie. You're going to hike it up for 3 minutes while we watch Wheel of Fortune, and that's going to be the sex. Is that going to be a deal breaker for you?
That doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen. Okay, would it be a deal breaker?
Believe me, there are not women who just behave that way that when I'm with them. And I am very experienced, I'm very skilled, and it's not blowing my own trumpet. The fact is that this sort of stereotypical image of the person whose legs you have to prise apart, and they wear the great long nightie and so forth. Many people's sexual desires and mores are just waiting to be untapped.
So you like the challenge of unleashing that in someone who otherwise would never do that.
Yes. So sometimes they will fight against it, not in a sense of they're frightened. It's just that it doesn't feel something that's necessarily comfortable for them. And part of what I get out of it is I know, because of my extensive experience and because I understand people, it's quite simply, let me take you along this road, and believe me, put your trust in me and you'll find it rewarding. And they do. And it opens them up to experiences that they would have never contemplated having were it not for the fact that they were involved with me. And being able to take someone who perhaps is a little bit timid or shy in that regard, not dead set against it because they're terrified, but it's like, no, I'm not quite sure about that, or I feel a bit silly. But you've got to remember, you're not meeting them at a bus stop and immediately saying, let's do this. You're making them feel at ease. You're making them feel desired. They're in the mood. And then you take them along that road and you open doors up, which hitherto they didn't perhaps even know that they saw that door. And then you help them through that door. They don't have to go through it themselves. And then afterwards, they're lying back and they're thinking, I never realized I had that in me. And that kind of response, of course, provides me with huge amounts of fuel, and also demonstrates that they're under my control, that I've caused them to engage in something that they were initially reluctant to do or were nervous about engaging in. And now they're going, I can't get enough of this.
Do you have a playroom in your house that's dedicated to this, like a 50 Shades of Grey room?
No. I have a very large, the two properties I have two large bedrooms which lend themselves to the playing of games.
The playing of games with a little bit of, what is it, Strange Love by Depeche Mode on the radio and some candles burning in the window.
Perhaps, but there is no sort of sex room that I've created, because you usher somebody into that. You see, you can go obviously to certain places and find people who are definitely up for that kind of behavior, because there are organizations and networks that exist for all of that. And I would rather, if I was to be involved in that, I would rather do so in the. It wouldn't be within the confines of my intimate relationship. I would just sign up and go to these appropriate clubs, etc., and indulge there if I deemed it. To me, there's a greater level of satisfaction bringing somebody into my world and collecting them. And so if I brought them back to my house and went, open the door, and they looked in on this sex dungeon, they'd probably like to go, oh my goodness me, what's all this about? And so what you've got to do is you create an environment which is one that's more familiar to them, and you can introduce those things as you go along. And that's what's much more effective and rewarding. Again, too much is taken from what people see on television and on film, etc. And it's much more rewarding to draw somebody into my world and cause them to open up like a flower for me in respect of behaving in a particular way that they give themselves willingly as a consequence of my coercion.
Okay. Suzette says, excellent interview, having worked as a mental health professional for the past 28 years, HD. Okay.
Thank you, Suzette.
Julia. Hi, Julia. Julia says, does he like being dominated as well, or is it all about the woman?
I am the dominant. There will be instances where I would agree in certain instances to being restrained, but generally I'm the one that does the dominating.
Because that's the sadist side, correct? That's the one who likes to do the doing.
Well, it's more to do with the necessity of control, and I'm just not submissive by nature. As I have explained previously, there are some narcissists that engage in submissive behavior, and they do so because, first of all, because they decide to do that, they still have control in that respect. And also, many people engage in behaviors where they are submissive because it's not just about a sexual thing, it's about a release from responsibility. And consequently, subconsciously for that narcissist, by still being in control because they're the one that made the decision, but then relinquishing that control by being submissive, it provides them with a degree of release from that underlying need for control. For me, I don't need that release. I would rather utilize the issue of where if I'm restrained in order to make that person feel a particular way so they provide me with fuel, and for me to get a residual benefit because it would cause me to, for instance, have a particularly intense orgasm.
Is there something that really turns you on in the bedroom? Is it the fact that you have the control over the partner? Is that what really gets you excited?
It's control that matters most for me. And that doesn't mean in terms of, there'll be some instances where some people like to be thrown around and flipped like a burger. That works for them. In other instances, it's more about control of that mind, getting them to open up. There's other instances where, in effect, I consume them with my darkness. That doesn't mean that I start, cutting them and things like that.
Right,
but
right.
rather they feel because I'm capable and because of what I can do, they submission to that sensation of raw power that's in and around them, the sensation of my musculature against them, the lowering of my voice, the what ifs, etc. And the ability to cause someone to react to all of that is particularly satisfying.
Lauren Cox says, is there anything you wouldn't do or you really aren't into, HG?
Children hold no interest for me. I'm not interested in, for instance, getting smeared in shit, because that's just filthy. So I'm no interest in that because of I'm a bit of a hygiene enthusiast.
Yes. And sex is dirty. Sex is, you get a little, messy, right?
Yeah, I don't feel the need for someone to take a huge dump on my chest after I've given
Okay,
them
good.
so there are certain things that I am not into. Yeah.
Okay. Mel says Michelle is lovely. HD should meet up with her.
Mel, are you a wedding planner or something? Are you touting for business here?
Yeah, I think that we're getting married in 10 years, so we'll plan it.
Oh, right. Okay. I see.
Yeah, well, I did see that Depeche Mode was coming to Austin next month, and I was going to send it to you, but I'm like, well, maybe next time. Yeah.
What's that in relation to?
Oh, yeah, so Depeche Mode is coming to Austin. And I was going to send it to you. Be like, oh, we
I
should
know
meet it.
that they have a film of their live concerts coming out.
Oh, okay.
Tickets go on sale in I think September the 17th, and I think
Yeah.
it's rolled out from October. Perhaps it's related to promotional work for that.
Yeah. Well, maybe next year we'll have a date. We'll plan a Depeche Mode date. Okay. Mama approves, y'all. Mama approves. Okay. I have a lot of questions, but I don't want to take up all of your time.
Well, you can save them for another occasion.
Yes, I think we'll get more into the 50 Shades of Grey, maybe another show. But I just
Sure.
wanted to thank HD Tudor for stopping by the channel. You guys go over and check out his YouTube channel. He has a wealth of information. He has 256,000 subscribers. Let's get him to 300K. And he also has another channel which he is dedicated to teaching people about psychopathy. And I think it's really, really important. He gives a lot of good information, and we need to get him up to 10,000 followers. And my bestie says she is truly grateful for this in-depth interview, Mr. H.D. Tudor. It significantly enhances our understanding of the topic.
You're most welcome, Alicia. Thank you for that observation. I'd just end by saying, whilst I've only touched on certain aspects, and particular in relation to me, if you are involved with a narcissist, or you know somebody that it is, or you're trying to move on from it, or you just want to understand more about the topic, I have thousands of blog articles, thousands of videos. Use them. There's lots of material, as Michelle has highlighted, in my knowledge vault, and you can arrange to speak to me. Read the testimonials from people. You can dip into the work for free, so it doesn't naturally cost you anything, and you'll recognize how potent and effective it is. You can talk to people on my blog, and they will tell you how it's worked for them. You can look at the testimonials that appear in relation to my products and services, and then you can decide, I'll engage with HG. You will not regret it. Anybody that utilizes my material becomes enlightened, they're given insight, and they achieve the freedom that they richly deserve. Use this material. It's life-changing and it's life-saving.
Very well said. And he has a wealth of books that you can also check out on his website as well as on Amazon. They have helped thousands of people, guys, and he gives a lot of free advice over on his YouTube channel. So I just want to give a shout out to my moderators. Thank you, Carol and Lizzie, for doing an amazing job. And of course, thank you to the wonderful HD Tudor for coming back to the Royal Daily Tea YouTube channel. It's always fun and fascinating to speak with you, HG.
Not at all. Thank you, Michelle, for your interesting questions, and thank you for inviting me onto your show, and I look forward to the next conversation that we shall have.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Have a good day. Make sure you head over to Sue Smith's channel. She has a very fascinating live. There's some legal stuff going on with her and YouTube, so make sure you go and check it out. Bye, guys.